Congressman Lazarette, thanks for joining us this week.
Yep.
Well, Congress has been out, but there is actually things going on, or at least things kind of brewing here in D.C. I wanted to start with something that seemed a little bit like Groundhog's Day, and that's the question of the raising the debt ceiling. We've obviously had some huge fights in the past, going to the brink over the question of raising the debt ceiling. There's been some rumblings from some in the Republican Party that they'd like to have a fight over the debt ceiling, but it seems like there's a whole bunch of people who are saying we want to avoid a debt ceiling fight. What do you think is going to happen?
Well, if you remember the government shutdown, the 16-day government shutdown, after that, the minority leader, Mitch McConnell, sort of famously said, we're not going to do this again. John Boehner has been kind of forceful, the Speaker of the House, in saying that that was a dumb strategy and we're not going to embark on it again. I think the government runs out of money, these extraordinary measures that are available to Treasury Secretary Lew on about February the 7th. It may get bumped by a week or two, but it's going to be during that week. And I think you've hit the nail on the head. I think the conventional wisdom is that they will try and take a run at some of the things that they could get in exchange for raising the debt ceiling, for instance, the individual mandate, and things that you know, the president may do on his own because things aren't going so well in the Affordable Care Act. But you do have the wild cards. You still have Senator Cruz, and you have some other people that may be spoiling for another fight and think that it was good for them either personally or for their position. So it's one of those to be determined things, but the winds that are blowing at the moment say that we're not going to have a repeat of the government shutdown.
It seems like a lot of Republicans believe that that was politically bad for Republicans, and especially now as we're starting to turn our attention to the 2014 midterms, it seems like there's going to be a lot of focus on the political theater and how this looks.
Well, that's exactly right, and you have, as a result of the sort of flawed rollout of the Affordable Care Act, the generic ballot, what's called the generic ballot, and what that is that when they poll, they just said, when you vote for Congress in 2014, are you more inclined to vote for the Republican or the Democrat? The Republicans have a pretty significant lead for them at this time, and that always is a sort of a harbinger of how things are going to go in the midterms. This is the 6-year-ish election for President Obama. Presidents in their 6th year, no matter who they are, what party they belong to, America grows a little weary of them, and their party tends to lose seats, sometimes a lot of seats, in the House of Representatives. And so I think conventional wisdom says that Republicans are going to continue to focus on that. The Democrats are going to sort of shift, and you now see them at the state level and also at the federal level talking about raising the minimum wage and other things, and that'll probably be their cause célèbre for 2014.
Well, another issue that we've talked a lot about over the last year or so is immigration reform. Mm-hmm. And it was one of these hot issues that at one point seemed like, oh my God, something's going to happen. And then it seemed like, all right, pull the plug, nothing's going to happen here. And in the last few weeks and months, we've seen that Speaker Boehner in the House and Republicans have shown some willingness to move this kind of piecemeal, not a huge comprehensive package like in the Senate. And we hear recently that Speaker Boehner's immigration reform principles that we expect to be released before the State of the Union will include, or is likely to include, some sort of provision for legalization of at least some folks who are here illegally. How do you think this issue is going to play, and what do you think that means legislatively moving forward?
Well, the news during this off week, and folks were basically back home in their districts because of the Martin Luther King holiday, is that the Republicans are eyeing 4 pieces of legislation to take bite-sized pieces out of immigration reform. And actually the effort is being spearheaded not only by the Speaker, but Paul Ryan, the party's last vice presidential candidate, the incoming chairman of the Ways and Means Committee. And he is advocating out on the stump. He was down in Texas at a Chamber of Commerce, I think, just talking about these. And it does have some interesting nuances. You would expect border security to be a piece of it, but the House has already passed that. You would think E-Verify, which is employment, would be part of it, but the House has already dealt with that issue. The issues that haven't been dealt with are visas for low-skilled workers, so agricultural workers, nursery workers, things of that nature. The House has already taken care of the high-skilled visas, the professionals. And so that would be a piece of legislation. But I think the most surprising thing that's being talked about is that, in fact, there would be an avenue for people in the country illegally to gain legitimate status. And they would have to pay a fine, they would have to learn English, they would have to pay taxes and things of that nature. But that's that's a big breakthrough for Republicans to go there. The other thing that's a big breakthrough is the so-called DREAM Act, and that is that children who were brought to this country by their parents who were not supposed to be in the country would be granted citizenship or legal status. And so the goal is to pass those before the July 4th recess. If they're successful in doing that, one of two things is going to happen. The president and the Democrats will either embrace that or they will double down and say, well, that's nice, but we want the full Monty, we want the whole shebang, and unless you're going to give us everything that we want in terms of pathway to citizenship, we're not going to help you.
Well, how much opposition do you think they're going to face within the GOP conference? I mean, this has obviously been an issue that in the past has really fired up conservatives within the Republican Party, and it's made it incredibly difficult for immigration reform advocates on the Republican side of the aisle to work on this issue. I was a little surprised that as the lead up to the midterm elections that Republican leadership seemed to have an interest in tackling this issue. Does that mean that some of that opposition has tamped down some?
I think the blueprint that they're going to follow is the blueprint that they followed on this last budget deal. So again, the point person will be Paul Ryan. And Paul Ryan, by all accounts, is a conservative. He is accepted by the most conservative part of the Republican conference in the House of Representatives. They trust him. As a result, he was able to, not without 60 people voting no, but he was able to fashion that deal with Senator Murray that actually passed and is now in place and has led to sort of regular order. If he again is the point person on this, I expect the same type of dynamic where you're going to have 60 Republicans and some Democrats too, maybe, that just are not, just don't want this issue taken care of in a way that grants lawful status to people. But I think at the end of the day, if Democrats join and say, you know what, half a loaf or 3/4 of a loaf is better than the full loaf, you can have legislation here. If they take the view that, no, if we can't get 100%, we're not interested, then you got a problem.
It'll be interesting to see how this unfolds. The last thing we wanted to talk about was President Obama delivers his State of the Union on January 28th.
Right.
I know that State of the Unions are a lot about theater, but we're in an election year and theater matters. So what should we expect to hear from the President in his State of the Union?
Well, first of all, the State of the Union in Washington, D.C. is really always a special event. It's one of the things that happen, like the inauguration of the President, but this happens every year. And it's a big deal. And we've just had the Grammys and the Emmys and all this other stuff. And so they always say that Washington is Hollywood for ugly people.
Right.
So
I don't really know how I feel about that right now.
All the ugly people are going to show up next week. The thing will be packed. The articles today are who's going to, who people are bringing. Like Representative Louis Gohmert has invited Sean Hannity to be his guest in the audience and so forth and so on. So everybody will have stars. There'll be a lot of star spotting, but it is the president's opportunity to put forward what he, where he thinks the country is. That's the first State of the Union. But the second is what he's working on. And if you look at his recent speeches as he's gone around the country, I expect to hear from him about immigration. I expect that we will hear about this minimum wage push. There was a poll out the other day that 67% of Americans believe that income disparity in this country is a problem, and that shouldn't be surprising because you have some people that are making a lot of money, but more people are not making a lot of money, and I think will try to drive that home. He's going to have to address the Affordable Care Act, and I think he will probably give a few anecdotes about how it's working for people that didn't have insurance before. But I think he's going to need to be forthright to indicate there's some challenges, and he's disappointed in the way that this has happened. But it's to lay out his markers for his fifth sixth year as President of the United States, and it should be an interesting speech.
Do you think this is going to be a speech that's about big ideas, or do you think this is really going to be a speech that's more about the smaller ideas?
I think this is going to be small ball because there really is not enough time left in his presidency, nor is there the dynamic with the split form of government to get anything really big signature done. And I think if there is a signature item left for him to accomplish, it would be immigration. And that goes in line with what we talked about a few minutes ago, that if he embraces and finds the common ground to try and get some of these things done, he can achieve it. And that would be a big accomplishment for him. But it's one of those to be determined.
Absolutely. Well, we look forward to talking with you more about this and other issues in the weeks ahead. Thanks again.
Thank you.